Greetings, this is the Question GM, and welcome to a new RPG Study Hour session. Um, so, it's really been a very long absence since from the last stream, I understand that. But then again, like I said, I'm trying something new, and I'm been meaning to restart this whole RPG Study Hour thing, which if you haven't seen in my previous series with, I believe was Star Trek Adventures, is basically I take a system, I read it live on stream, I give myself an hour to go through various parts of the rule system that I'm trying to study and trying to learn how to play, and maybe even have a little bit of side discussion of what's going on with the system. And it's basically a live straight walkthrough with the system as we go along. Uh, because I'm trying to simulate a bit of the learning experience or the learning curve when it comes to learning new systems, and so that maybe you as a new player who's interested in the system will be able to see how it works, experience it as the way I did, or maybe for designers who need a little bit of input or feedback of how one player at least approaches their systems and how their layout, their organization, their writing, their text, their explanations can help gel or not gel with the imagination or the understanding of players. So this is just a very free form way of looking at systems in general, so that anyone can take any value out of it as they see fit. So I have been thinking for a very long time since 2022 what system that I wanted to do for my next RPG study hour, and I have even made a list. I went through all my PDF in a library in Drive Through RPG, and there was a lot of candidates. But the reason why I ended up picking with Worlds with the Numbers, as you can see here, is that because I'm currently playing in the game of Worlds Without Numbers. If you're interested in checking out how we are having fun with the system, you can go over to Substandard Role Playing, the YouTube channel. You can, I mean, it's easily searchable on YouTube. But besides, us having very much lighthearted fun with the system, I think it's a very good opportunity for me to, expand horizons and expose more systems that is not the world's most popular role-playing game in the world. Worlds Without Numbers is definitely one that I hadn't expect to get into as soon as it is right now. It's only because of this, through the coincidence of playing with the guys at Substandard Role Playing, that we decided, okay, we'll pick this one up and we'll see what it goes. We've already had one session at the time of this recording, and there's still a lot to learn because I didn't really manage to get a lot of reading done while I was into it. But having said that, I will not be skipping the parts that I already know, because, like I said, this is part of the learning process as you see it unfold before you and see how it's like. So, the agreement for this RPG study hour sessions is that I will only limit myself to 1 hour. The stream will only last for 1 hour. There may be a lot of back and forth, flipping through and back, just to understand concepts. There may also be very drifting reading, very slow reading, very fast reading. Uh, I'm not sure if I'm going to be intentionally reading word for word. I think I'm just try to get a general gist of the concept before I uh, move on or summarize what I've read and try to build an understanding of what has happened. Uh, and this is a live stream. The idea of the live stream is for interaction, but at the end of the day, I will try to create a more abridged version of these recordings, so that either, and maybe I will even annotate with chapters so that you can sort of skip to the parts that's more relevant to you rather than watching the whole thing an hour a day, an hour a session, just to get the full experience if you really don't want to. So, this session in particular, as what I always do, or what I always plan to do for every new RPG or every new book or PDF that I get my hands on, is always it's always a general flip through. Like, what does the whole book entail? We're talking about page numbers. We are talking about sections. We're talking about chapters. We're talking about how the book presents its information on a much higher scale, on a much larger scale. We're taking a very big overview of what this game is presenting itself. So we won't be, and from that point on, once I'm done with the flip through of all that, then it's where I usually come in to try to start planning out the number of possible sessions that I will need to fully finish studying the whole system from cover to cover. Uh, and when it comes to the planning stage, I try to organize them in chunks, not necessarily by chapters, but in chunks that would be valuable on their own if you are trying to look for a specific part of the system to understand rather than going for the entire chapter. But having said that, there may be times where chapters are short enough that you could probably fit the whole chapter into one session, and then it'll be up to for me to annotate the chapters in the video so that you can jump to the relevant parts in that chapter alone if you're looking just for further understanding on that. So no real commitments or no real attention is really needed here at this point for this first session. And let's dive in. Let's talk about Worlds Without Numbers. As you can see on the screen right now, the version that I got of the game is the free version, which I believe you can easily find on DriveThruRPG. I will probably put the links down in the description if you're really interested. And I don't know if there's any difference with like the deluxe edition or the paid version of this. I'm made to understand that this is pretty much the full game, without any missing parts, or that at least the version that I'm playing right now with the guys at Substandard Role Playing is based on this. I could be wrong, but for the purpose of this for the purpose of this series of videos, it will be based on the free version. So if you feel like that is not the one that you're looking for, or if there is a difference between the free version and the other versions, paid or deluxe or whatever they call it, in terms of text, like if there's any missing options or missing rules, do let me know in the comments so that I may have to consider purchasing it, and then we probably have to do a restart of this series, or a new series for the paid version of Worlds Without Numbers. So looking at here, we have the cover. It says a role-playing game by Kevin Crawford, and I believe this is based on a engine called Space Without Numbers or something like that. There was a sci-fi version of the game, so I'm made to understand that Worlds Without Numbers is sort of the fantasy version of that engine. But setting probably won't be that much of a big deal in this series because we are here to study the RPG by themselves. So it's really more about the core mechanics and the understanding of the engine and how the moving parts work, so to speak. So moving on, we will now look into the cover. You have the cover, you have the front page, free version. It says there very explicitly. And then we have the table of contents. So this is the easiest way I will do my breakdown of the book. It's usually starting with the table of content because that's the structure of the book itself is presented. So we have Tales of the Latter Earth, and then we starts at page 1. Then we have character creation at page 4. So there's probably a good chunk of about 3 pages worth of talking about the setting, which I'm assuming it's a setting of Latter Earth. And then from page 4, we have rules of the game in page 38. So that's about 34 pages of character creation alone. We have rules of the game at 38, and then it goes into magic and arcane traditions in 60. So that puts it about 22 pages of rules of the game, which is considerably short, I would think, for other RPGs. But I do have a preference for games that have very short rules, because they sort of encourage play in the sense that you don't have to learn too many concepts. You don't have to cram too many things into your head just to be able to start playing. As a player, at least, if a game has short rules for players, there is a possibility that there is a bit more burden on the GM side to have more rules that they have to put in their heads. So we'll see how that goes. So we have Magic and Arcane Traditions at page 60, goes up to page 94 when we reach the world of the Latter Earth. So that's about 34 pages on Magic. And you'll be interesting to note that they spend just as much page count on Magic as much as character creation, but it's relatively much shorter when it comes to the rules of the game, which I'm not complaining. That's probably just having a lot more options. Maybe there's a lot more explanation into what these, maybe magic plays a very significant role in the world. That requires a longer page count to explain how things works. So I mean, that's what we're trying to find out. We'll see how really is that does Magic and Arcane Traditions really deserve 34 pages. Then we have the World of Latter Earth, which is in page 94, and then creating your campaign, which is page 114. So that's about 20 pages, just talking about the world setting itself, which I think that's pretty wonderful. Uh, I will admit that I'm like a lore kind of guy. I like having very detailed worlds. But at the same time, sometimes when you have too many, when worlds are very dense, they can be very difficult for a GM because they have to learn so much about the world before they feel they are ready to run in it. So I'm guessing this idea of the Latter Earth is pretty much very descriptive and very impressionistic in a way that it's providing fuel for imagination rather than telling the GM what to imagine. So in page 114, we have creating a campaign, and then it goes into creating adventures, which is page 222. So that's about 108 pages, just talking about creating your campaign. So that's pretty significant. That's actually a lot of page count dedicated on creating your campaign, and they have a distinction of campaign and adventures. Now, I don't want to use so-called D&D paradigms, but this sounds very similar to D&D paradigms. But of course, the burden of explanation, what's the difference between a campaign and adventures, should be on the text itself, on the definitions of the game itself, not on some assumed understanding of what the word means in other systems, particularly like D&D, or maybe even other systems who use similar terms, or even role players. If you're role players who've played for a certain amount of years, they may attach certain meanings or certain definitions to the word campaign and adventure. But I always try to come into systems with a clean slate, with the assumption that it is the duty of the text to explain to me what's the difference between a campaign and what's the difference between an adventure. I'm not bringing in any assumptions on what those are. And then we move on to Creatures of a Far Age, page 280. So that's about 58 pages between creating adventures to get there. Creatures of the Far Age sounds to me like it's a bestiary thing. You're gonna have stats for monsters, and I'm actually pretty impressed that they managed to squeeze so much of the setting information, including monsters, including GM rules, into a book, into the same book itself. And then we have factions and major projects, which I'm guessing factions is the factions in the setting. I'm not exactly sure what major projects mean. Maybe it's something to be explained in the settings sections of the game. Maybe in page 94 somewhere else. Then we have an index at page 346. So that's about 24 pages of talking about factions, which is fine, I guess. That's all. I mean, I'll never say no or ask for less lore details about our world. But I do see the point of having them less. So just for perspective, if since the index is at 346, the total page count on the PDF, so I'm going by PDF page count, not necessarily the page count on the pages itself, is 352. So the index takes about so-called 6 pages, but I may not be exactly 6 pages. But index is, that's what an index is for. They're good for searching things when you need them. All right, so we'll go into the first page. So I'm going from this point on, since we've passed the table of contents, I'm going to be like jumping around. I'll be doing like a quick flip through of what I expect to see in the next in every chapter in the next few pages to get just an impression of how the things are organized. Maybe some artwork that's worth ogling about. But I will definitely be jumping about just to have get a general idea uh, of how this book is structured. I will have to say though, and I'm going to show you this to you, that it, what I'm very most impressed is this book has a very clean structure of bookmarks, and I believe it's organized. It's not necessarily corresponding to what we see in the table of contents. Like we have character creation here. Uh, we do not see a section on equipment, armor, and weaponry here. It's not located in table of contents. We have the rules of the game, which is corresponding here. We have magic, but doesn't say magic and arcane traditions, which is fine. You get the idea. World of Letter Earth is there. Creating a campaign is there. Creating Adventures is there. Creatures of the Far Age is there. Factions and major projects. And under each chapter bookmark, you will have a all the subsections are found there. You have equipment as well as that, and then you have rules of the game. So the way this bookmark is organized is very, very conducive to finding the subsections that you like to look at, and gives you a very good idea of what kind of subsection rules they are, and mechanics that you need to build that basic foundation. And we'll probably find out as we go along whether all the subsections are captured, because it becomes very frustrating when a certain subsection is not captured in the bookmark. And when you have to find that subsection later on, you're going to assume it's in the bookmark, and then you're not going to remember the page number, and then you're going to be flipping back and forth and wondering to yourself, did you actually see that subsection or rules? But at this moment so far, I will have to say I'm very impressed with the bookmark organization of the PDF. I think it's something that shouldn't be overlooked at by some games, especially thicker ones that that can run up to 400 pages or more, and it's very invaluable just to have a very neatly organized PDF with bookmarks that are corresponding. And to add even more praises for the organization of the book, I would say is that the links, the words on the table of contents itself is hyperlinked. So if I go to Tales of Letter Earth, it takes me there. If I come to Rules of the Game, it takes me there. And it's corresponding, it goes to the right page, like Magic and Traditions. Creatures of Far Age, it goes right there. So, these are very tiny gestures of proper organization that makes life so much easier. And that in itself just I give them a thumbs up to any designer who understands the value of having a good bookmark, and how much it makes a person very much more willing to read their rules and appreciate them. All right, so we'll start with Tales of Letter Earth. Okay, just 2-column text, very long. There's blocks of text to read through. You have a Heroes of Twilight Age, I guess it's explaining the role of what the players are playing as. What do you do in this game is a very good subtitle here. See, what you do in this game. And then you have one on how does this game play, which is giving a basic idea of what it's. This is your almost obligatory section of what is a role-playing game, but in the sense that it by taking this approach of saying how does this game play is a very much more unique approach to the game itself. You may not need to have a perfect understanding of what a role-playing game is, and you may not have if you're a new player, but the fact that this book is willing to guide you through that process of how do you play this game and what do you do in this game, I think is perfectly fine. It addresses its own problems by itself. All right, so okay. We have art, and then we are actually now into character creation. So that's character creation, and we will say, I don't think I'm a very good person when it comes to describing art. So I'll just let you breathe in the moment to see this art by itself. I'm not very good at describing art sometimes because there's a matter of aesthetics and style and what sort of inspirations or references they are making to, which is definitely not always my forte. In terms of impressions, I guess I could just say unless it's something very unique or very outstanding, then I can probably explain my impressions of that. At this point, it just feels like this is something very generic fantasy in a way. You want to call it Western medieval style, maybe. Uh, and definitely a bit, but it looks definitely a lot more mellow in the sense that it's not really fantastic like high powered D&D or Pathfinder or something like that. It's not, it doesn't feel very action packed in that sense. You see, I'm very bad at describing artwork. Anyway, moving on. Summary of character creation. I mean, you can't go wrong with a faster way of creating character. In fact, I may even argue that that's the only way you should create characters, is giving them a summary of how to create characters. Don't throw me, 20 pages of class options before telling me how I make a character. All right. So this is one interesting one. One thing that I really like, because if you look at the character sheet here, and I do sometimes make an argument that the best way to learn how to create a character or to understand the game of the rules of a game is actually through the character sheet, because the character sheet is the interface of the player to know what they can do in the game and what is important in the game. And the fact that the way the character sheet is printed here and it's corresponding to steps in the character creation summary, I think is very helpful, very forward thinking of the designers to say that, okay, this is what our character sheet looks like. Let's try to make the process easier to know where they're supposed to fill in the numbers. And if I did a stream on creating a character, I'll probably put this to the test. Like, does it really show and tell us where to put the numbers, and is it in the right place of the numbers? All right. So I definitely like this, having this idea of this concept that the summary is tied to the character sheet. All right, so we're talking about attributes. This is where I'll start jumping around. Because under character creation rules, you have attributes, you have skills, you have backgrounds, you have class, you have foci, you have final touches and equipment packages, example character creation. Now, this is actually very good because this sometimes the best way to explain a rule sometimes is just to give an example and show it in action. And given how lengthy this is, it feels like the book is going really extra lengths to really explain the whole process and what it feels like and what a player could be thinking when they're making the decisions that they want to make about their characters as part of the character creation process. So that's definitely a very good idea to have. Okay, and then we will have like an equipment chapter. I think this is an equipment chapter. We're talking about, so we have some base rules of regarding encumbrance. We talk about adventure gear, and let me just, okay, so it's about only the encumbrance rules only takes up about like a page or half a page or like just a single section of the column. And then we have adventure gear. Not a very long list, as you can see. It's about a single page, and then we were talking about gear bundles, which is, I guess, which a faster way to build a package of gear already pre-packed and give it to the player, so it makes the character creation even faster, because nobody has a really not everyone likes to spend an hour or half an hour just to going through every item on an adventuring gear list just so they can pick out what they want. And we have like beasts of burden. So the beast and transport is actually under here. You have hirelings and day labor. A rule system that I'm not necessarily always in favor of, but the fact that you have included that in there means that the game probably has thought of something of how they want to handle this. So that's why it's there, for a reason. Services and living expenses, and then we go into armor, and you can see the armor takes a very small section of the page. I mean, having a list that fits within the page, I think, is a very good sign that nobody's going to have a lot of options to think about, and they can really just go ahead and actually play the game. Okay, and we have weapons. Okay, so this is where it starts to look a bit lengthy, and okay, takes up half a page. Pretty daunting, if I have to say. But I guess that's part of variety. Oh, okay. That's part of variety, that there are a lot of weapon choices, not as many armor choices. But if you like having choices. That's not necessarily good, not necessarily a bad thing. All right, so from there we move into rules of the game. So what are the basic concepts that this game is talking about? We have things like the basics, okay? So we have the basic system. We talked about what the basic systems here. The core mechanic, if you really want to call it that. And so we have skill checks, saving throws, and combat. Is there anything else we should add to that? I think that should be all. All right, yeah, that's it. So the three basic concepts: skill checks, saving throws, and combat. Okay, maybe that's why the rules are so short. Okay, and then using the systems in play. While everyone is encouraged to read and understand the basis of the foregoing campaign, practical GM must recognize that a great majority of players will read and digest no more of a rulebook than they absolutely must, and often not even so much at that. Okay, that's a pretty cheeky but true observation. That yeah, this system or this rulebook is fine to not be read, and it's the GM who has to modulate or facilitate what should be happening, and that responsibility is not on the players necessarily, although it would certainly help the GM a lot if they did knew the rules to being played. But the fact that this book goes on the assumption that it's really not about the players understanding the rules, either suggests that the rules are flexible enough for a GM to make the right call when they don't know the rules, or it's just that simple of a game that you really don't have to memorize anything, so pay attention more to other aspects of the game rather than the rules, like your role playing or your character generation or your character decisions or how you develop character as you play. And I'm guessing this bolded areas are, they're talking about some general guidelines of what a GM, uh, how should a GM approach the rules in the sense or in the context when players don't know the rules. What should they do? So be willing to translate actions into roles. The GM decides what is role. The GM makes the rules. And lastly, hold these rules lightly. These are very general, good, strong general guidelines to tell the players. They are the rules here, but this is how you use them. And sometimes the way to use them is to not use them. So, that's something unique for role-playing games, I think. All right. So we have the rules of the game, and then they will go into scenes and turns and durations. We will figure that out. We have saving throws, one of the basic mechanics of the game. We have skill checks, also one of the basic mechanics. And then we have combat. And let's just take a quick look at how many rules are there for skill checks. There's only 2 subsections. And I'm guessing we can see that here. We can see when to call for a check is there, aiding a skill check is there, and a post skill check is there, and all of that rules of skill checks fit into one page. Is there any more? No, it doesn't. It fits into one page. So one of the core mechanics of the game is covered in one page. How great is that? Okay, and then we go on to combat, and that's where I'm going to start expanding this. Okay, so this is where things get more substantial. We have rounds initiative, which is under here. As you can see, we have actions in combat, which is here. We have attacking a foe, also here. We have shock damage. Okay, so the thing that was missing is hit roll modifiers, which is not in the bookmark, but will probably understandably covered under attacking a foe. If you want to hit somebody, they are definitely modifiers. They may or may not be involved. We have shock damage, which is here. And then we have dual wielding weapons, which doesn't have an entry in the bookmark. Sad. Then we have shoving and grappling, which is here. Shoving and grappling is here. And then we have execution attacks, which is here. And then we have common combat actions, which is here. And I'm guessing this is where the list starts to grow a bit. Could have used a expansion node on this side if you're gonna have many actions, so that we can find the specific action much more quicker rather than going through this list. Yeah, so that's like what this starts on page 44 and it goes up to page 45. Okay, so not that long of a list, but still, you always want to reduce the time of flipping in the heat of combat, especially, to find the particular action that you want, so that you can expand the rules on that. All right. So once we're done with, now that we're done with that, we'll go into injury and healing, and this also has its own node, expansion node. So we're talking about mortal wounds and stabilizing. We're talking about natural healing, which is not, doesn't have a bookmark there. Magical healing, and we have first aid, magic. So both styles of healing are not in the bookmarks. Okay, and then we have first aid, which is here. We have system strain, which I think is here. System strain, and then we have poisons and diseases also here. I have a feeling this is going to be another short one-page thing. It is a short one-page thing. That's actually pretty amazing. The fact that healing takes 1 page and combat is the only one that takes for how long? It's just page 42 to page 45. So 3 pages talking about combat. I mean, there are definitely games out there that take more page count to explain the whole thing. So that probably explains why this rule section of this game, and probably the best part of this game so far, is the short rules, because it doesn't take very much space to explain, and you can start playing. All right. So falling and other hazards, we have overland travel, wilderness exploration and expeditions. Or in the bookmark, we have site. Okay, so this is taking a bit longer pages. We have site exploration, which is here. All right, a couple of pages. Then we have character advancement, which is in page 54. And we're talking about 2 pages, I think. Yeah, 2 pages of that. Modifying and customizing equipment. All right. Not sure why is it particularly in this side of the book rather than, say, the equipment side that we saw earlier. We could have done it here in page 429, but here we are in page 56. But we'll see. We'll see if it disrupts the flow of reading, or there are concepts that are mentioned here that are not mentioned here. Although I hope that's not the case, and I would dislike it even more if it was vice versa, where there are concepts that were talked about in the equipment section here, that will only be explained when we come to here. If that's the case, I really hope that this should have just been joined with the equipment section. All right, and then we have modifying equipment, maintaining modifications. Wow, example of modifications, a really long list. And then we have building and crafting gear, which brings you the question of what's the difference here. One is building and one's modifying, I guess. So I guess they need different rules. Yep. Okay. And then you have a system quick reference sheet. Oh, this is very interesting. Did they just summarize all the rules in one single page? I think they did. Yes, this is actually very interesting. Huh. Yes, I like this very much. I like this very much. That your understanding of the game can be boiled down into a single sheet, or maybe more. No, it's only a single sheet. Everything you need to know on a general concept level. If you need more explanations, you know where to go and find them. Are these hyperlinked? Okay, they're not hyperlinked, but pretty good. I would say that's a very good thought process put behind into explaining and exploring what the rule does. Okay. Now, if we shall move on, what do we have next? That's the rules of the game, and we're not talking about magic. Okay, magic and arcane traditions. All right, lengthy. We're talking about mages on the letter F. It's setting information. Okay, like this. And then we have spells and arts, which is already talked about. It has a bookmark there. We're talking about preparing and casting spells, so we're getting a bit into the nitty-gritty of the rules itself. Takes about 2 pages, I guess. Yeah, we have arts, we have creatures, targets, and visibility rules. We have arts and effort, which I think is, yeah, it comes to here when we click efforts. Then we have, okay, so efforts takes about a couple of pages. And then we come into dual partial traditions. Okay, Not sure exactly what that means. I think it has something to do with the class options that you could possibly take, partial mage or partial warrior or something like that. And then we have the spell list, basically the spell list, the high magic spell list. Goes about 2-3 pages. Yeah, high mages. So there's a spell list, and then there's an explanation of the class, I'm guessing, or the tradition itself. And then we have, okay, so we have the arts. So basically, a spellcaster class in Worlds Without Numbers is defined by their tradition, by their arts, and by their spells, I guess. Yeah, that feels like it. Okay, and then we have spells of the High Mage, which is I'm guessing it's the descriptive version, the official version of the spells in the spell list here. But it's never too bad to have both. Uh, Although as a matter of preference, I would have preferred the spell list to be somewhere just before the spells description themselves. But it feels like they were playing around with space limitations or layout limitations to put it them in front. So we have the High Mage. Uh, you know, I have a lot of spells. With the Elementalist, I'm guessing it's pretty much similar in in approach and layout and what they want to show you. Elementalist new magic. Okay. Oh, that was a pretty short one. Okay. We have healers. Okay, healers. Healers as a spell tradition. I guess that's fine. Because we're not making assumptions that only certain classes can cast certain spells, I guess. So that's I mean, no complaints there. We'll definitely find out more as we dive deeper into these rules. Okay, we have necromancers, and we have necromancer new magic, and then we have the vowed. So I have no idea what this is. I'm guessing it's another tradition, but maybe they have different benefits as well. They have vow arts. And I'm guessing. Oh, but they don't have spells. Okay, that's interesting. Do they have spells? I don't think they do. All right, we will have to find out when we read the rules. All right, then we have developing new spells. Okay, so I feel like at this point there's the sense of customizability in the game. We've already seen rules for customizing equipment and gear and creating gear, and then we have the freedom and flexibility to do the same with spells. Crafting new spells, what new spell criteria, building magical workings. So it's probably something like magic items, I guess. Okay, I guess I'm wrong. Creating magic items. There's rules for that as well. So I'm guessing this is not going to be something we can fully grasp until we actually read this section of the rules to know, the nuances, and also how does it work within the framework of the system that is built upon. I'm guessing that we have to really understand, like, this is where the rules for magic comes in. May not be explained in previous sections. There were definitely no magic rules in the rules of the game section, as you can see here. There was nothing talking about magic. So this is really the chapter for you to come in and figure things out. Just as a frame of reference, I am playing a mage in the game with substandard role playing. So, and I haven't even read this chapter yet. Silly me. But this is definitely a chapter that I will have a lot of vested interest into figuring out what is actually going on and what are my options when I'm playing the game. When I'm playing with the boys at substandard role playing, what I can actually do and really get to test out the capabilities of the systems and limitations of the systems, because you never know. Sometimes rules may not fully explain or properly explain what's allowed and what's not allowed, especially when it comes to things like magic, and in the sense that they may be very strict confines to what the spell can do based on the text, or the text can also provide space for adjudication to the GM to you go figure this out. What the spell can actually do is up to the GM's justifications and definitions and understanding of what they want it to do, and of course that has to be argued with the player some of the time. All right, so now that we're past, I think we're past magic. Now we're going into lore, world building, lore section of the game. We're looking at the lore, the world of Later Earth. Let's see what sections do they have. Okay, of former days. Okay, so we're talking about starting a Gyra campaign, as you can see here. Starting a Gyra campaign. and then they talk about genres in Gyra. Okay, I'm not sure if that's the right way to pronounce it, but that's the way I'll be pronouncing it, probably for the rest of the session of the series. Uh, and we have genres in Gyra. These are not available in the bookmark, as you can see. We have a world map, which is fine. Former days, so we're probably talking about a bit of history, background to the world, nations and features of Gyra. Okay, and then we have subsections of the small towns, and let's just have an idea of how long they each of them take. So Imit Cash starts at page 100, and it's only a one-page thing. So Kaadun is one page, one page, one page. Okay, that's great. One page descriptions doesn't give you a lot to work with if you're a GM who prefers the work done for them. But at the same time, like I said, it's always a counterbalance between providing too much and providing too little, and what you're supposed to do with that amount. If you have too little, it gives you space and creative imagination to work on. If you have too much, then it improves it. It requires more prep time to read up. But at the same, but you might be saving time in having to figure something out. Okay, and let's see. We shall have people and language. Okay, that's under chapter bookmark as well. We can go into depth. Faith of the Jar. Okay, we have outsiders under Aratus. Okay, so yeah, there's probably some very important. These are probably very important forces or things you should know of the world that can be an inspiration and can be a tool for the GM to plan what do they want the players to do and what it sort of things that the players are doing in this world, what matters and what doesn't. You have the Aratus, so anyway, the Ethereums, the eco worlds. Okay, so that sounds like there may be some sort of planar hopping, if you will, between the world of Gyra and outside of it. Maybe that's part of the setting. Like there is sort of the level curve, if you want to call it the power curve. Well, once the player starts in Gyra and then they eventually hop out into other roles. Maybe that's where they go. All right, so we go into creating your campaign. It's page 100 and it doesn't say the page on this one. It's 116 here, so that's 15 and 14. All right, so creating your campaign. Let's see what the subsections are. Planning your work, building your backdrop, geographic construction, nation construction, society construction, government construction, historic construction. Okay, religion, ruins, points of interest, location tags. Not sure why would you need to have location tags, though. As a form of organization, yes, but do they have mechanical meaning behind having different tags in the place? You have communities. We have communities, but it says community tags here. I'm not sure if that's what it's meant to be. You have court tags, courts. Okay, this is going into some pretty interesting lore stuff, I guess. Though we don't see a court thing explained in the lower section of the. It was not. We do not see any courts mentioned in the sections of the world of Ladder Earth earlier. So we'll need to pay attention to what this exactly is or what it does. We have courts tags, we have ruins. Okay, fine. We have wilderness. And then using the game in other settings. I mean, I have no complaints about games that are willing to be, they are self-aware that their system may not always be the perfect fit to their setting, or may be tied to their setting in such a way that it cannot be removed to be played anywhere else. So I'm actually pretty glad that they have included this section, and they tell you like what materials to import, importing a vector content, which is I think great. So I mean, it gives me the option to consider the system the next time if I want to run, I don't know, some other setting, and I like the system. And if I like the system of Worlds with the Numbers, I'll say, hey, this is one way I can bring Worlds with the Numbers into another setting, and it will work pretty much just fine. and they are already giving me the considerations that I need to have when I'm doing that. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. That the system is so flexible and open about itself. All right. So that was what? The, I mean, it doesn't feel like it's a very long section, but I guess it's. I guess when you take into consideration what the constructions are included, all this construction, and it's interesting that this is in here in the create a campaign section, because it feels to me like this is the tools for generating a sandbox. What happen? What if you if a player stumbles into a next town or a next dungeon or whatever? Uh, this chapter itself is, I think, supposed to sort of address that. Like the GM can make these things on the fly with guided guidance of what to do, to create a open world, so to speak, for the players to explore, and not having to worry about thinking about new things or what to do and what to put. So all right, so page 114, at least on the what it says on the PDF. I think we counted it was page 114 to page 100, 200 something, 222. I think it was, yeah, that was 222. So like I said, it's about 100 pages worth of just building the campaign setting, and then we are now going into areas of the building the adventure, which has its own subsections. And oh boy, okay, this is where it gets pretty rough. So okay, as you can see, there's a lot of subsections here. What the GM needs to bring. I think that brings one page. GM issues. Okay. That's actually interesting. Let's have a quick look at this one. What do they mean by GM issues? Talk about disputes during play. Okay. Arguments among players. All right. Rules in ambiguous situations. Is there anything else? GM calls for skill checks using social skills. Okay. I like that this talking about on the table scenarios. This is not necessarily related to the rules. Uh, and why it's important, I think, to have these kind of sections in the rules is because this is uh, an acknowledgement of the rules to say that there are problems with our system that may or cannot be addressed by the rules and the mechanics and the text itself. But we are going to give you guidance on how you handle these on the table situations in relation to our rules. Uh, they may and can be honest that if there is certain areas of the rules, for example, like we were talking about rules in ambiguous situations, what is the rules predisposed to address in what manner? So as GM, you may be given an idea of how do you adjudicate the rule base that is closer to the spirit of the game, and what sort of play styles or emotions or behavior that the game itself is written to encourage, rather than having the GM figure that out as they read the rules, because, or even as the players read the rules, because as we've mentioned earlier, the players are not assumed to have read these full rules to start playing, or to be even able to play. So this is pretty, I mean, we'll probably go into this in much detail when we get a chance to, but I'm actually looking forward to reading this part, because I'm now really interested in seeing how the rules is so self-aware of itself, of where the limitations are, and if they do admit to their own limitations, what are the sort of approaches that the GM is encouraged to do so, and hopefully in relation to the rules. Okay. GM issues, and then we're talking about planning and running adventures. Okay, so we'll get to see some approaches and some of the philosophy of what they mean by adventure. We are talking about sandboxes and story arcs. I think they're giving you a step by step of how to prepare your adventure. You see these bold headers right here. They give you an idea of what's important or how to go about it, which is great. I mean, that's great because we talked about some players or some GMs may be coming into this without any prior knowledge of what a role-playing game is, or even if they did, whatever paradigms that they were using to create new adventures in that game may not apply here. and therefore it's best to start from scratch to explain to the GM or the players like this is how it's done in this game. So you can just sort of forget whatever you've learned, or pick and choose whatever you've learned and apply it to here, because this is supposed to be the structure of the game. This is supposedly the structure where the game is that the rules are made to accommodate for. It's also one thing you can consider. So we'll figure it out. We could figure it out as we go along. We were talking about running the adventure. We are talking about prep. We're talking about running. And then we talk about create combat challenges. I guess that's where this is. Create combat challenges. How if you're talking about D&D, there is actually a math element to it of how you create combat encounters. Let's see, does this game have the same sort of philosophy to it? I don't see anything at the moment. All right, we have a thing called combat challenge complications, so we don't know what that means, but having a table of events rather than a table of this number equals to that number, I think it's a refreshing thing. All right, creating exploration challenges. So this is the only section that has its own node in comparison to the other nodes for the under creating adventures. So let's see what it has here. Choosing the site type, generate room of interest, layout the rooms, add optional map features, stock the rooms. This feels like a very standard, typical D&D sense approach or version of creating random dungeons. So either they may be hijacking some ideas from there, or they may actually surprise us and actually give some unique ideas of how they do it in a setting that is unique to World Without Numbers. So we establish daily life. So there's a very organic, ecological feel into it there. Make a detailed map, copy of the final map. All right, so we're talking about maps now. All right, type of ruin sites. So we can just skip ahead and just have a look. Frame of habitation, types of inhabitants, rooms of interest, hex points of interest. Okay, so this is something I wasn't expecting to see. Does this game encourage or allows or has accommodations for hex crawls? I've not had a lot of experience with hex crawls because that was not the tradition that I grew up my gaming years in. So we will just have to see what does this section of the rules really talked about and what is it really for. We have, let's see, we have room layout, map features, stocking rooms, and I'm looking at the time right now and I don't really have much time left, so I think I will have to really speed through and breeze through the rest of the book. But I guess at this point we already have a general idea of what we're going to study and what this book is really containing and has what sort of scale we're talking about in terms of complexity of the rules. All right, so we have stocking rules, we have random encounters, I think it's right there. Okay, and then we'll just close this and we'll go into investigation challenges. Pretty interesting idea. The fact that this game takes into consideration that there may be things that you will want to explore around this game. So have at it. You'll never know. I mean, it gives that extra layer of playability of what the rules is capable of doing. Then we have social challenges, and then we have rewards, renowned experience points. Okay, that's fine. I mean, the game sort of subscribes to this idea of experience points, and that's how you measure character progress and character development. Here's for it. I mean, like that's one of the easiest and simplest reasons why people play role-playing games for their characters, anyways. Then we have placing treasure, land ownership and domains. We've already talked about henchmen and building of keeps. I think we saw earlier. So land ownership seems like a pretty natural supplementary rule to complement that whole subsystem of the rules of what is it like to be a landowner, and maybe you could build a castle upon it and grow your domain. That's great. I'm just curious how long this one takes. So it's page 258 goes to about 259. So okay, not that extensive. May not be as extensive as people had hoped, but we'll see if it's really that useful. If it's even really worth getting invested into doing this part of the rules, or playing out this part of the rules. All right, and then we have hunting wealth. You have talking about sending treasure, too much money, matching items, and enchanted treasures. Okay, this is another one that also has a subsection of nodes here. Magical armor, grimoires, examples, and calaxis. Magical weapons, always a favorite thing among players. Magical devices, and enchanted elixirs. Okay, so we have categories. We have categories of magical items. Something to look into. Something to may actually have significant differences in what they mean and what they do. And now that we are done with the magic items, all right, we go into creatures. Okay, so we can close this node. We can go into creatures, and as I'm expecting this to be a pretty long list, but it doesn't actually look too bad. Okay, so we have the basic rules of like monster tables, how to create monsters so early in the section, which is I guess it sort of gives you a sign that this game it has more flexibility and options for you to create monsters rather than using the pre-made monsters that comes with the rules. So we're talking about the blight, monster shapes, monsters drives. Okay, I'm not sure what this is. I'm hoping it's something to do. Talking about monstrous motivations and why they do what they do, how they live, and how does that sort of conflicts with the players or characters at least into fighting. I guess pretty much boils down to that. But at least a fight with motivation is much more interesting because there's some stakes involved, emotional or otherwise, into which weaves into combat into narrative involving combat. All right, we have uncanny powers and abilities. I'm guessing this is for monsters. We have customizing your monsters, which is fine, I guess. If you have a base if you have a decent amount of base template of what the monsters can do, and you can customize it based on that. Adjusting monster statistics, judging combat challenges. Okay, we've seen a little bit of this. Maybe we were talking about combat challenges earlier in the, I believe, is Create Adventures section. So maybe this is where you get a bit more explanation. Then you have reaction rolls, parlaying. Okay. This was a comment that my GM made in Substandard Role Playing, that this is the game where you sort of subvert the expectation that every monster fights to the death, and once it reaches a natural conclusion or natural foregone conclusion, that's when the monsters act a bit more smartly instead of grinding everyone down with multiple more rounds of, at this point, pointless combat. And then we also have moral checks and prudent retreats. So this gives an impression that combat in this game is not meant to be fought and won, in a sense. Everyone has to make those clever and right decisions of when to fight, when not to fight, when to retreat, and when to continue, and when to make your last stand. All right, and we have a thing called instinct checks. Like, I have no idea what this is. This is a mechanic, obviously, so we're gonna have to read up this one and see what it does. And we'll go into creatures of the Ladder Earth. We have animals, we have automatons and eidolons, blighted, Anakim. These are definitely going to be setting specific terms. We have judges, what's it, half-men, Horus, demi-humans, dwarves, elves, imperators. We have the outsiders, which was talked about earlier in the world setting section. There are like different types of these. And then we have the undead. And then we are going into the last section, which is factions and major projects. This would really probably take a really in-depth study to really understand what it's going to be about. And I'm down to my last minute. So we have sections, we have things like, what's this? Faction turns, asset location and movement, attribute checks, faction tags, faction turn actions, creating factions. Okay, so all right. Without having any, just based on first impressions, so you're not only building like you're not really like just owning land, building castles, but there's a possibility for you to like build a faction in this game, like becoming an actual moving force in the world. And this is how you manage them and what you have to manage, in terms of building up or developing your faction. I guess this is what I'm gonna call it. And I'm guessing that's where the projects come in. Like, you have to do projects to improve or gain some sort of resource for your faction. With construction costs, hirelings and servitors, all right, soldiers and guards. And these are the Kickstarter backers. Okay, I guess. So So it's an hour already, and I'm actually a little behind because I didn't really get to talk about how I'm going to break down studying this game. Uh, so either I'm going to do that in the next section, the next session of RPG Study Hour, which is probably a more prudent thing to do rather than just diving right straight in and hitting going about it almost in the dark without having any really structured and planned approach to how we're gonna study this. It's so I guess I'm a little sorry that this is an hour worth of flip through. Uh, I guess it just helps to give you an impression of what is contained in the book, but it doesn't really give you a proper idea of how the book is organized in terms of its rules. So I guess I'll see you in the next one where I'll really talk about the breakdown. And if you I'll try to cut this video into I'll try to make an abridged version of this stream, so maybe that's where you save some time just to probably be able to flip through this old book in 30 minutes instead of an hour. But I'll still thank everyone who's come to watch this flip through with me. I'm looking at my list and I think there's nobody here, so that's fine. But like I said, there will be a abridged version that I'll upload, and we can talk further on. We'll see further on what we're gonna see in Worlds Without Numbers. So I thank you all for coming to this new series of RPG Study Hour by the Questing GM, studying our game Worlds Without Numbers. So I'll see you again.